have, as the majority of people in this country, a belief in God and in the Bible and in Christ. And because of that, even though some of it's kind of loosely adhered to, still there is a great deal of influence from the New Testament teaching, from Christianity. We are seeing that influence wane, and we're wondering why we're having the problems we're having today. But that's really, it's directly related to that, folks. Even people who are not faithful Christians have been influenced by it enough to know that there are certain things that are right and certain things that are not. You know, it's not right to steal from you. It's not right to kill you or to hurt you. And they understand that. Why? Because, well, in Christianity, you do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And there are people who will actually insist on that, who can consider themselves atheists. They don't believe in the Bible or don't believe in God. And the reason why is because the influence of that has been felt over the last several hundred years in this nation and so forth. So that's the reason why today there is still that strong influence that's there. And it still lingers, although it's waning, and there's a warning there for us. It is waning. It is getting weaker because people are beginning to question Christianity as a whole, question the Bible. They always have, but not in as great a numbers as they are today. So that's a problem, isn't it? But why the sword? Why would Jesus talk about the sword? If you don't have anything, if you just don't have the ability to afford it, you better scrape something up and be able to get a sword. Why? Self-protection? Self-defense? Okay. That's the camp I fall into on it. I will tell you this from the get-go. And as far as others maybe having a difference of opinion, that's fine. I can't be really dogmatic about that, but I don't believe that the Bible forbids us to protect ourselves, to defend our families. I don't believe it does that. I do believe, however, that the sword was not to be used to propagate or defend the gospel. You defend the gospel with reason. You preach the gospel with reason, with words, period. And if you're arrested for the same, then you just simply turn it over to God, put it in His hands, you make your defense, and whatever happens, happens. In the first century, it was very common for people to be arrested and put to death simply because they were preaching the gospel. And we're not in our day and age and in our country today, not having that problem, at least not yet. Okay, so we could eventually have that problem, but we're not to use the sword for that reason. So that's my opinion on it as far as self-defense. Dave? I'm sorry, Bob, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Right. Mm-hmm. They're coming into dangerous times, aren't they? It's going to be difficult. As a matter of fact, I believe the entirety, at least the vast majority of the book of Revelation is talking about that. So many people read Revelation and they say, okay, that's talking about the second coming of Christ, the end of the world. I don't think so. I don't think so. The vast majority of it is the establishment of the church and the difficulties of the persecution over the next 350 years, talking about the first century, which, by the way, equals time, times, and half a time that it talks about. That's 3.5. It roughly comes out to about 3.5 centuries. That's about the time before Christianity is generally accepted as being a force for good. Even if people don't believe it, they generally accept it, including the Romans. The Roman Empire actually befriends Christianity. And he said, oh, well, there you go. That everything's all peachy creamy now. Not exactly. When the Romans basically made it their state religion, they also put their worldly influence into it, and that's why we've got the Romanism of today. That's why we've got a lot of that that still lingers over as well. The church departed from the simplistic teaching of the gospel to go for all these man-made creeds and doctrines too. But as far as the difficult times ahead, there were terrible times coming, persecution, facing death, and which was so severe that caused Paul on a couple of occasions. 1 Corinthians 7 comes to mind, that says where he says that if you're not married, I would prefer that you remain like I am, unmarried. Stay unmarried because I want to spare you the trouble that's about to come. How difficult it would be because you're going to be leaving behind a widow and children, maybe, if you get married now. It's going to be a dangerous time. You may not want to do that, which, again, is not a prohibition to get married. It's not forced celibacy. It was left up to the individual. The person who did marry, Paul didn't say you're sinning if you don't take my advice. He's just saying for the present distress, it would be better to remain unmarried because of that persecution that's coming. So yes, dangerous times are coming. Times are changing. And I think that's one of the things he's telling them. Before, when I sent you out among the Jews, you didn't lack anything. You didn't need anything. Now you need to take advantage of every opportunity you have to take care of yourself. Some have suggested, well, robbers infested the area as well. And they did. They did. Sometimes all that's needed is the show that you've got something to defend yourself, and that's it, a deterrent. And so if people are thought, well, they're armed, or in the Old West, they used to say, well heeled, okay? If you are someone that is armed, then generally the person who's thinking about doing something wrong to you may be deterred from doing that. That's the desired effect, isn't it? Rather not use it if you don't have to, but it's there in case you need it. And it might serve to protect you in that instance. But one thing I do not believe, I'm reading, and I quote from John Gill's commentary a good bit. I like John Gill. He's not a member of the church, so you got to kind of take with a grain of salt some of the things he says. He says this is not to be taken literally, that the sword here is representative of the trials and the turmoil that's going to come upon them. And while I do believe, like Bob just said, that is times that are coming, I really don't believe that this is to be taken figuratively. Why? That's enough. Right. It's not talking about figurative, is it? There's a general rule of hermeneutics, all right, of interpretation. This general rule I've found to be true is that unless the context says otherwise, a passage should be taken literally. That's just a simple rule, a rule of interpretation of the scriptures. Now, the book of Revelation, its very name, apocalypsis, tells you it's not to be taken literally. It is figurative language. You know that. Just from the very get-go, the apocalypse of John, apocalypsis, the revelation, what God revealed, or what Christ revealed, or however you want to look at that, to John on the Isle of Patmos, the revelation of Jesus Christ to John. But the word, we call it revelation, what Jesus revealed, but the original name of the book is apocalypsis, apocalyptic language. Its very name says that it's to be taken figuratively, not literally. So in this passage, if you say the sword is figurative here, what about the scrip in the knapsack, or the knapsack here, the scrip in the purse? I got knapsack on the brain now. What about those? Are those to be taken figuratively too? You see, it doesn't add up. Okay, what's Jesus is saying is you're going to need to be very careful. A passage I think that goes right along with this, and we talked about this last week. I got some comments about not liking the snake on the picture on the PowerPoint in the sermon. Jesus said, "Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be as wise as serpents and be as harmless as doves." Okay? So how do you do that? How do you balance the two? A snake is not considered harmless usually because a snake will bite. Even a non-venomous snake will bite, all right, to defend himself. Does that make sense to us? Sure it does. The snake doesn't go around looking to bite people. This is the thing that I'm not a fan of snakes. You know that, all right? But rattlesnakes. Have you ever come in contact with rattlesnakes? Timber rattlesnakes are different from diamondback rattlesnakes. Why? Anybody know? They're rattlesnakes. They're all rattlesnakes, but you run into a timber rattler around here in the southern part of the state, you almost have to step on them to get them to bite you. Okay? They generally will not bite you. They don't want to bite you. They're very calm. In fact, people will pick them up and they will capture them and then use the venom to make anti-venom. And a lot of the people that do this, you might say they're crazy. I'm glad we got crazy people to do that because we need that anti-venom. But I'm glad that they do it, but they prefer the timber rattler because it's so calm, so laid back. I don't think of snakes that way, but they are. They're very laid back and they don't bite unless they absolutely have no choice. Diamondbacks are a little different. The diamondback sidewinders out west, they'll bite you just as soon as look at you. Okay, that's what I understand now. I don't have much experience with them, but that's what I'm told. That's different breed of or different species of rattlesnake. Well, you don't have sidewinders around here. You don't have diamondbacks around here. You do have timber rattlers in places, but they're kind of rare. You don't see them too much around here. Down south, I met a man when I was vacationing, a man named, ironically, Steve Smith. Okay, so I remembered his name. That's how I remember it. And he showed me his leg where he'd been bitten by a timber rattlesnake. And he said, "I just got out of the hospital." And the only reason he got bit is because he stepped on it. He said that they're usually pretty calm. They're usually very calm. Dave? Mm-hmm. 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 Eastern diamondback rattler, and they are very aggressive. Now you're going to give me a hard time sleeping tonight. They're around. Okay. So they are aggressive ones. All right, Steve. Mm. Mm. Most of the time you get bit is because you either surprise or step on or otherwise threaten the snake. I do know I have had experience with aggressive venomous snakes before, not rattlesnakes, Dave. But anybody ever run into a cottonmouth? I didn't know. I'm not from the South, and I lived in Arkansas for a year when I went to my junior year at Harding University down in Searcy, Arkansas. And I saw snakes swimming out in the water, so I decided, like a dummy, I was going to throw sticks and rocks at it. You don't do that to a cottonmouth. I found that out the hard way. They come after you. They will come after you. Now, the snakes around here, most of my experience that I've had with them is they want to get out of your way. And I think that's what Jesus is alluding to as well. For the most part, a snake is a fragile animal and can be hurt very easily, can be mortally wounded, and will get out of your way if it can. Give it the choice, it's going to try to get away from you. That's why he said, be wise as serpents. So don't put yourself in harm's way. A Christian that has a martyr complex and decides, well, I'm going to just go ahead and dive head first in this, and if I die, I die. Well, I don't think Jesus wants us to have that kind of a complex, a martyr complex. If we have to die for the faith, so be it. But don't put yourself needlessly in harm's way. And that's what I think the wise as serpents part is. And also, maybe to defend yourself if you absolutely have to. If you have to. I don't believe it's wrong for a man to defend his family, defend his life, defend his children, his wife, whoever it might be. I don't believe that that's what the scriptures are teaching. And I think that's the idea here with the sword. Now, others disagree with me on that. That's fine. But, again, practically, realistically, a man's going to defend his house. He's going to defend his family if he can, if he's able to do that. And I don't think that Jesus is telling us to be aggressive, to go out there and to just simply antagonize people with a sword, or brandish the weapon, or swing it around and threaten people or bully people with it. But I believe the idea was, and this back at that time, that's what they did. They carried a sword, a sidearm, to let people know, I'm armed, don't mess with me. If you're thinking about robbing me, you better think again, because I've got a means to defend myself. All right? And I think the same thing is true today, usually not with a sword, but with a pistol or something of that nature. And that has been shown. I know people disagree with me on this one too, but it has been shown to reduce crime when people are able to do that, to legally concealed carry or whatever you want to call it, are able to do that. Dave, you had a comment? Mm-hmm. It's a natural reaction, isn't it? Right, of course. Yeah, if you hear glass break in the middle of the night, all right. What are you going to do, fellas? Okay? Let's just suppose you got a squirrel rifle sitting there, or you got a shotgun, or whatever it might be. Do you think you would use that? I know I would. Absolutely. To defend my wife, to defend my family, to my own life. Somebody's breaking into the house. And that doesn't mean I set out with the intention of killing anybody. I don't want to do that. But I will defend my house. I'll defend my family. Okay? We're wired that way. And that's what Jesus said. If the good man of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would not suffer his house to be broken up. Well, how is he going to not allow or suffer his house to be broken up? Hey, shoo. I don't think it's going to work. I don't think it's going to work. You're not going to deter somebody that way. Right, right. Yeah, well, then somebody says, oh, you're just thinking of your possessions. Not really. Exactly. In fact, if a guy's got an armful of jewelry, which he's not going to find in my house, or silverware or something of great value, and I'm standing there holding a shotgun on him, and he says, I just want to leave. Bye. I'm not going to shoot him. Just get out of here. Stay away from my family. It's not the possessions. It's not the physical possessions, folks. Not at all. Not in my case. Certainly not. Take whatever you want. Just get out of my house. Don't come back. That's the way I look at it. Tim? We're wired. As Dave said, we're hardwired that way. I believe we are. I think that it's a natural reaction. It's not something. I don't think it's a wrong reaction either. I think we need to temper that with Christianity. I think we need to understand what's going on here. And no, I don't think we need to chase them down. And if they get out of the house and they run, let them go. Fire shot in the air if you want. Come back again, and this is going to be waiting for you. But don't we're not killers, we're not murderers, and that's not what we're about. But there are laws on the books. We run into trouble no matter what. But there is the castle laws in the different states. West Virginia, I believe, is one of them, where a man can defend his castle, defend his home, uh, and that's just a natural thing. And I think it's what this is referring to. That's my honest opinion of it. And you may disagree with me, and you're free to do that. But as far as I am concerned, I will certainly defend my own. I will certainly do that. Right. Agree. 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 Mm-hmm. They're there for trouble. They're there for the wrong reasons too. Anybody that wants into your house with legitimate reasons is going to knock on your door, and probably not at 3 o'clock in the morning. Okay, there may be a genuine need for that, but you still have to be careful, right? Somebody might have had an accident or something. I've answered the door at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Uh, the woman bleeding all over the place. Okay, still, that was over here in Ardmore, as a matter of fact. She broke the glass on my door, uh, and she was someone who was looking for the former preacher's son. Monty Summers used to live there, and she was very, very high. And we got an ambulance called and everything. We tried to calm her down, and she did actually. She did. They took her to the hospital and took care of her, but. I was very concerned at that time in the morning. And you look out and you see a woman standing there who's obviously not in her right mind, and she's bleeding all over the place because she's broken the glass on the screen door. She's cut herself. That's a scary, scary situation. Scary. Bob? That's right. That's right. Most of the time, that's what they're going to do. They're going to, somebody is going to be casing your house to find out when you're not there because they don't want to run into the shotgun. They really don't. I got a couple hands up here, Steve.
Yeah, I see this on the news this morning. There was a man, this house, they locked their door on their car and in the house. Well, the guy breaks into the car, steals a pair of tennis shoes, then goes into the house and was literally sleeping on the couch.
Mm-hmm.
Water or whatever, got it with her, got up and used the bathroom, I guess, and found this guy laying on his couch, went back upstairs so the guy wouldn't hear him call 911 for the police.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something like that. That just tells me that there are drugs or alcohol or something's involved with that. He's not thinking straight. Obviously not. Charlie? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's true. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. And that's the whole point of it. Whoever takes your coat, give him your cloak also. That's what he's talking about. Earthly possessions are not worth that. If it gets down to that, and Bob mentioned here about, well, you're just defending your material possessions. Not just, certainly not just. I would be defending, as far as I'm concerned, I'd be defending my family and material possessions that are part of it, of course, because that's part of how I provide for my family. But it's not just about physical things. It's about protection. And I think that's what the reference here is. The sword is not to be used aggressively. It's to be used as a deterrent. And I think that's the case. In fact, there are laws about brandishing too today. if you're familiar with those. You don't take a gun out and start swinging it around and start showing people. That's a problem too. Threatening people. You can't do that. It's just there in case you need it. Dave, you had a comment? Right. Hmm. Hmm. Right. And most times it comes down to a split second, and then you make a decision that you have to live with one way or the other. Uh, yes, it's not something you don't. It's not Hollywood, folks. If somebody breaks into your house, you're not going to sit there and have a discussion with somebody. You're not going to have a discussion. It's just that simple. Everything's going to happen in a blink of an eye. So, I hope it doesn't happen to you. I hope it doesn't happen to me. I really don't want it to. But there you are. That's a situation we have to face sometimes. What are we going to do about it? Again, I would read the scriptures and pray about it, and you make your decision based on that. Gene? Hmm. And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that. If you, yeah, being my wife being an employee of the school system, we become aware of some things too. Drugs are terrible around here. I don't know how aware you are of that, but they are terrible. And I'm not just talking about I'm talking about the big ones like heroin and cocaine, things like that. I'm not talking about just and I'm not belittling it either, marijuana use, and that's illegal too, and it should be, just like anything else. It's a drug, all right. And although I believe there are legitimate uses for that, I know that they are able to distill that for pain relievers, and that's fine. But the recreational use of that, there's a good reason why it's illegal. It impairs judgment. Right. Hmm. Right. Right there. But the thing is, it's not just in Steubenville. It's here in Weirton too. It's in Follansbee. It's all around here. So and that makes people desperate. In fact, we were broken in here into this building. Some of you may remember, probably it's been over 20 years ago now. The fellow bled all over because he broke through the glass and was bleeding. Okay, you remember that? That was drugs. Actually, that microphone right down there, he could not figure out how to get it out, but boy, he really uh, he tried to get that out of there, and he couldn't figure out his little button. If you squeeze it in, you pull it right out. But he couldn't do that. They tried to get the television. There was a little television in the library, and he tried to, you could see what he did. He picked it up and tried to pull it out. The cord was still in the wall, and it was still pointing toward the outlet. Tried to get it out that little thin window. They broke that too, I believe. But tried to get it out that little side window, and all he had to do was walk through the doors. It just at that point, and there wasn't any alarm system back then. Okay, but that's what people do when their minds aren't thinking correctly. So again, what are you going to do? You're not going to reason with such a person either. That's not going to, Steve.
Yeah, I was living up in Arlington in a house that was made into apartments. I was just sitting out in our neighbor and his one friend one night. Well, I was going to go upstairs and use the bathroom. He's like, you don't have to go up to your apartment. Just go. I did, and I come back out, sit back down, and 5 minutes later, I feel somebody tapping me on the shoulder. But it was one of the police officers. He's like, I need to see you off from your apartment. I get upstairs because he's accusing you of stealing his oxycontin. And the police officer sees all my fire department stuff, and he goes to me, are you with Ford? Are you Steve Miller from North Fire Department? I said, yeah, why? Then he goes, I know the info you didn't steal his oxycontin. I'm like, all right. Well, then a couple days later, he's accusing other guys in our department too.
So these are the kinds of things that happen. We live in a world that's crazy like that. in many ways, and drugs certainly make it even crazier. So again, the idea of the sword, again, not forcing the gospel on anyone, not propagating the gospel with it, but perhaps in self-defense. But Jesus does, I don't believe he means it figuratively here either, because they're going to talk about the swords here in the next verse. And then that's going to be, or 2 verses down. Now, verse 37 is going to give you the reason. For I say unto you that this is written that must yet be accomplished in me, and he was reckoned among the transgressors, for things concerning me have an end, or there's a purpose for it. Jesus is going to be numbered among the transgressors, and his followers then are also going to be numbered among the transgressors, aren't they? Remember, he was crucified between 2 thieves, numbered among the transgressors. Christianity is not going to be well thought of at first as it comes out, and the infant church is going to have to deal with that problem because he's going to be considered a criminal. As a matter of fact, not just is he crucified between 2 thieves, crucifixion itself was reserved for the vilest of criminals, wasn't it? This is the vilest of criminals that they did this to. A person who just simply stole an apple at a market, they didn't generally put him on a cross. They might have punished him. They might have beaten him. They might have threatened him. They might have put him in jail for doing something like that. But generally speaking, they didn't punish a person by crucifixion unless he was a vile criminal. So Jesus being crucified on the cross, that's the first thing someone's going to say. Well, you're following a man that they crucified? That'd be their first argument. And then between 2 thieves doesn't help it. He was among that group that they just killed those 2 thieves. By the way, the word for thief there is actually robber, would be a more accurate term. It's not somebody who just stole something, but somebody who broke into people's houses like we were talking about, and usually cut the throats of the owners and then stole things at their leisure. So these are the kind of thieves that we're talking about that were crucified on either side of Jesus. The term is actually very descriptive. The one, of course, had a change of heart, didn't he? And he received forgiveness. But still, these were horrible people that went to the cross. So being numbered among the transgressors explains the reason for having the sword. You're going to have to defend yourself at times. And then he goes on in verse 38, and they said, Lord, behold, here are 2 swords. And he said unto them, it is enough. Various modern translations change that around and make it say something that it doesn't say. Some of the translations actually say, enough of this talk. In other words, you're not understanding. And I've actually read some of the comments that were made where it says that, well, you're not understanding my meaning here. I'm not talking literal swords. No, that's not what the comments that are about that. That's not what this verse is saying. It is a literal sword that he's talking about. If you don't have one, you need to go get one. Even if you can't afford one, you better go get something to defend yourself with. And when they said there are 2 swords, and he said it is enough, he meant this is sufficient. In other words, we're not mounting warfare. We're not going to arm every man to the teeth and then go out and take over or rebel against the authorities that are around us or force people to accept the gospel. That's not what this is about. Why would 2 swords be enough among 11? Because Judas is not going to be a part of this, right? So we're talking about the 11. Why would 2 swords be enough? You're not mounting an assault on somebody, are you? Why do you need more than 2 swords? Well, let's just put it in modern terms. Suppose you're in a group of people. You have a concealed carry permit. Nobody else does. The whole group's protected, are they not? It's sufficient. That's what this is saying. It's not saying, enough of this talk. I'm amazed sometimes how people will twist the scriptures and even translations. I believe the English Standard even does this here. I'm amazed at how easily they will twist this to make it fit their thinking of what the passage is saying. And so people will use that translation and say, see, it is a figurative sword he's talking about. No, it's not. And the reason I can say it's not a figurative sword because there's no context for it. There is none. Everything else is literal. The purse, the scrip, knapsack, the sword. If one's figurative, then they're all figurative, right? It would have to all be figurative. And there's nothing that suggests that it should be. It's literal. And so when he says it is enough, this is sufficient. We're not mounting an assault. We're just simply talking about self-defense here. That's my personal opinion on that. Dave, real quickly. You're done? You're good? Okay. Well, we got 2 verses covered today. Oh well. We'll pick up there, Lord willing, verse 39 on Wednesday evening.